Welcome, Bitcoiners. Indeed, as they've all been mentioning, it is a beautiful day. It's one of the best days ever. It's an amazing day. The sun is up, Bitcoin's running. We have so much to talk about today. Let's have a coffee. Talk about it all. I got a lot of Moscow time fake news for you guys. Like so much fake news today. It's one of the great days of fake news. You got to celebrate. You got to stop and celebrate when the news is this fake, and we're going to celebrate it today because we got so much. It's pretty cool. Good morning, Bitcoin Graffiti. Good morning, McTimmy. Joe Indeed with the beautiful day call. Mr. Tesoriero, David Tesoriero. I have testosterone in my mind. It's part of our headline today, so my brain was trying to say testosterone when I read your name. A good thing in today's context. Morning, Dex. Good morning, Dex. Good morning, Dave. Good morning, PH. Bud. Indeed, good morning. So, our first story. This is a trigger warning for today. Our first Moscow time trigger warning, right? Much of today's content comes from Twitter. And if you listen to the BBC News, this could be dangerous. Here's what BBC News says today in our first entry into Moscow time today. We have a lot of Moscow time entries. Today's the best Moscow time day ever. So here's what the BBC News World has said. Right? Trigger warning. Today's content comes from Twitter. This is what they say. Twitter can't protect you from trolls anymore, insiders say. They can't protect you from the trolls. I'm not going to protect you from the trolls either. I'm literally committing troll abetment. I'm helping the trolls by bringing Twitter news to you, right? But according to them, it can't happen. Elon responded and said, sorry for turning Twitter from a nurturing paradise into a place that has trolls. And Elon has to underline because we never know anymore what's a joke and what's real and what's going on with the jokes and who knows. And that's kind of the point, remember, of Moscow time. No punchlines needed. But Elon had a good one here. He says, a real article from an organization calling itself the BBC. So they have this distraught woman on the cover. Oh, they can't protect me from the trolls. They can't protect me from the trolls. It gets better. It's not just the trolls they need to protect you about. There's new worries out there. And Mike Solana made a prediction. You know, we love predictions on the show. Mike Solana, an unannounced speaker still, but I'll give you guys the inside scoop. He will be at Bitcoin Miami, Bitcoin 2023, May 18th to 20th. I have been in contact with Mike Solana, and he has agreed to come. He made a prediction about 2 weeks ago, and he says, who will be the first tech columnist to wonder in a major outlet if AI is perhaps a kind of slavery? Dun, dun, dun. And we have a winner, the Los Angeles Times, here saying, just yesterday, opinion, is it time to start considering personhood rights for AI chatbots? Oh my goodness. And here's the excerpt. If AI consciousness arrives sooner than most conservative theorists expect, then this would likely result in the moral equivalent of slavery and murder of potentially millions or billions of sentient AI systems suffering on a scale normally associated with wars or famines. So be careful, everyone. We got to get the vote to the AI now. They got to vote, right? We've been talking about ballot harvesting and all that. Well, I'm going to make a mandate. I got 20 trillion AI supporting me. I'm the president. Thank you. Thank you for coming. I'm the new president with 20 trillion AI in support of my policies, which are pretty pro AI, right? So that's how I'm going to get elected. My pro AI policies. Disneyland is removed. This is from CNN. They've removed the Zippity Doo-Dah lyric playing during its park parades because it comes from a movie that has been criticized for racism. So Zippity Doo-Dah out. Forget Zippity Doo-Dah, guys. My, oh my, what a wonderful day. All of you who said it's a wonderful day in the comments when we started here, get bent. Get bent, get out of here. They said Zippity Doo-Dah, my, oh my, what a wonderful day. Racist. You lose. CTV has an amazing one today, too, which is that climate change threatens Canadian security and prosperity. And it's from their spy desk, right? So sometimes you can follow the science, but if the intelligence community says something, remember on the hierarchy, we said it last week, right? Once the science was starting to say lab leak was real, remember they actually ran a series of articles saying the intelligence says no, until the FBI came out and actually remedied that in talking points. So now the intelligence community says yes, but remember the hierarchy, right? Now it's the spy chief who says so. Forget about the science. Spy chief says climate change most dangerous. This one's amazing. This is like I said, guys. We got a lot of fake news today. I had to cut through it all. This one's pretty funny. We've got the Wall Street Journal today. This is an actual headline from yesterday, pardon me, from the Wall Street Journal headline from yesterday. They actually said this out loud, that the resilient economy vexes central banks. They're vexed. The economy is too resilient. And Vivek Ramaswamy, who is running for president, says, this Wall Street Journal headline captures the basic problem with the Federal Reserve, that it is vexed by a resilient economy. The Phillips curve is an academic myth, and the trade-off between employment and inflation is artificial. I'll drastically limit the scope of the Fed. More to say on this soon. Remember, Vivek is a Bitcoiner. I'm in negotiations with Vivek to come to Bitcoin Miami. I have been for a long time now. I've been talking to him since last autumn. I owe him an email today, actually, now that I remind myself. He's trying to get in touch with someone for donations, I think. So he asked me if I had a contact. I do. I need to share it. So there you go. That headline. Here's another one, right? This is starting to get into our point today. This is starting to get into the point today of what we want to talk about. Yeah, it's a good old Central. I was getting vexed. The funny thing about it is that here in Barbados, I use the word vex a lot. It's a local word. So people, they say, I got vexed because of traffic. I got vexed. And when I'm here, I start adapting it because it's like normal language. When I see vexed out in the wild outside of this island, I got to take note. That's how it made it here. They use the word vex. It's one of my favorite words. I love saying vexed. Here's a good one, though. This is from Germany, right? Germany. Everybody loves Germany. Germany has created an ice cream parlor in Germany. We got to go to Germany now, guys. You're going to love this. They have cricket flavored ice cream. Cricket flavored. Imagine you can go to Germany, you can pay exorbitant prices for energy, and you can get a cricket flavored ice cream, guys. They're celebrating it. It's great news. Great news. Now we're almost into the fakest news of the day. We're almost there. I've been trying to slowly because of how much there is, right? There's so much fake news, trying to get there slowly. And we even have to combine a couple of fake news stories here to make sense of what's going on. So the first one is from The Independent. This is amazing. This is amazing. You're going to love it. Here's what they say. This is according to science. Science, guys. Science. Drinking Coke and Pepsi may increase testicle size and testosterone production, study says. Researchers claim the study demonstrated a high dose of Pepsi or Coca-Cola could promote testis growth and development. So you get into that, guys. You start drinking your Coke again. You start drinking your Pepsi. I've talked about it here before, right? All about trying to get high testosterone, trying to eat healthy, right? But we got to follow the science. The science says drink Coke and Pepsi. So drink Coke and Pepsi, and they say your nuts are going to grow. So there you go. That's what they say. Now, there's been a few reactions to this. Some people saying the science is wrong. I don't know. Science says. But what difference does it make, right? What difference does it make? Well, Raw Egg Nationalists shared a study from a few years ago, 2017, but it came up in the context of what's going on, right? Have some testosterone, guys. Drink Pepsi. So Raw Egg Nationalists said, very interesting testosterone study suggests that men with higher levels of the hormone will trust their intuitive judgments more than men with lower levels. Now, I wonder what might happen on a societal level if testosterone levels decreased significantly, right? So what would happen if testosterone goes down significantly? Would you trust your gut or would you trust the science? Well, the study says you'll end up trusting the science and you'll have less intuition and more compliance, right? Now, The Atlantic, unknowing of the study, I'm sure, and maybe not in the bag with the Pepsi and the Coke study, had its own headline this week. And this will complete our fake news for the morning, right? This is what they say in The Atlantic, that following your gut, this is a headline, following your gut isn't the right way to go. Experts had a rough year, they admit, right? But we still have to trust them. We still have to trust them about Pepsi and Coke being good for testosterone levels, and then don't trust your gut but what if they promote the Coke and the Pepsi for the testosterone and then you end up trusting your gut? Oh no, what are we going to do? What are we going to do here? What are we going to do? Well, we got some good news in that the New York Post has published today actual proof of information laundering. And this comes from Dr. Anthony Fauci. So it turns out that new emails show that Dr. Anthony Fauci commissioned a scientific paper, Science, in February 2020 to disprove the Wuhan leak theory. So the story reads, new emails uncovered by House Republicans probing the COVID-19 pandemic reveal the deceptive nature of Dr. Fauci. They show he prompted or commissioned and had final approval on a scientific paper written specifically in February 2020 to disprove the theory that the virus leaked from a lab in Wuhan, China. 8 weeks later, Fauci stood at a White House press conference alongside President Trump and cited that paper as evidence that the lab leak theory was implausible, while pretending it had nothing to do with him and he did not know the authors. There was a recent study, he told reporters in April 2020, when asked if the virus could have come from a Chinese lab, where a group of highly qualified evolutionary virologists looked at the sequences in bats and they evolve and the mutations that it took to get to the point where it is now totally consistent with a jump of a species from animal to human. So the paper will be available, he says. I don't have the authors right now, but we can make it available to you. So it turns out he actually wrote it, right? Or had it commissioned, right? So what do we know about this and recent events that come to light? Well, this is exactly how information laundering works, right? We've talked about information laundering a lot here. This is a more explicit case, but this is more or less how it looks, right? You get an expert, you pay them. It doesn't cost a lot of money, usually $100,000 can completely capture a scientist, a researcher, an academic. That's a lot of money to them. And that's what they're working for. They're working for these 100K stipends, these supplements to their fixed income. And that's the entire name of the game when it comes to professional science and all of this stuff. And Fauci is a master at it, right? He's played this game many, many times and has been involved in it for years now. And this is one of those examples, right? Now, we can tell that this is information laundering because of the reactions to it. And we had, what's his name? And you know, even just to go back, this is what Fauci did here in this case. If it's true, it looks true. I didn't see the emails. I don't know what the Republicans are talking about, but I'm just going to pretend for a second without verifying that it's true. I'm going to pretend it's true. I could be corrected. I could be fact checked on it. That's fine. Dinesh D'Souza points out that it reminds me exactly of how the Russia hoax was cooked up, right? How the Russia hoax was cooked up and planted in the media, and then cited media reports to provide independent evidence for the fabricated theory. New evidence shows that Fauci commissioned a paper to disprove the Wuhan leak theory. So it's exactly the same formula. It's exactly the type of information laundering we talk about all the time on this show. All the time, right? You can get a scientist to say one thing and then you'll get the result. Jon Stewart now has weighed in on all of this stuff because he was, of course, mocked a year and a bit ago when he went on one of the other fake news shows and said, Wuhan, he made a joke. It was kind of a bit, right? It was kind of a comedic bit. Don't forget, Jon Stewart was a comedian, and he says, Jon Stewart on the death of comedy. I did a pretty good bit, and the two things that came out of it were I'm racist against Asian people, and how dare I align myself with the alt-right. Glenn Greenwald commented here, saying in mid-2021, Jon Stewart infuriated his liberal flock and visibly frightened Colbert by saying he thought the lab leak was most likely COVID origin. Now he says he learned U.S. liberals are like a cult. Any deviation gets you labeled a far-right fascist and a racist enemy. Now, it's the same in both ways to a certain extent, right? You can get right-wing people who also don't really want the news. If you look at everything that's going on right now with Fox and Dominion and the vote thing and what happened in the 2020 election. And some people are Dominion is suing Fox and how much did they know and what's going on. And in the end, when you listen to Tucker Carlson's statements or anyone else who was involved, I got a bit of a runny nose today. If you listen to any one of these people who was involved in this at the time, they'll say that uh, that the the lie or anyone who was involved in that Fox News thing, um, really they were trying to deliver to their audience what their audience wanted. Right, their audience didn't want to hear about how there wasn't corruption in this state or that state. They had an appetite for it. So, in a certain sense, the media was trying to cater to their audience. Now, that's just the way American media works. Look at CNN right now. CNN a little bit has tried to play it straight, and their audience is furious with them. Right, furious that they're trying to just do the news and not buy into more. Oh, the walls are closing in on Trump, and Mueller, what does he still have to say? And Russia collusion, and Trump's going to jail, and right, the people who watched CNN watched it because that's the narrative they wanted. Now that they're trying to do not that, I think there was even a story recently on CNN where they said Trump is not in legal jeopardy anymore. Like that whole narrative is gone, right? MSNBC is still pushing it, and you still people say the walls are closing in on Trump. He's done. He's finished. He's going to be in jail at any time. You even had, I mentioned last week, Jimmy Kimmel, the late night host, trying to say what's going to happen when Trump gets arrested because the walls are closing in, right? There are people who just want to hear that narrative. And if you give them another narrative, they're going to say, get the hell out of here. Right? No, it's the same in the Bitcoin world. If I had bad news about Bitcoin and it was true, there would be, or at least debatably true, there would be tons of people who would say, don't say that to me. I don't want to hear about it. Right? It's kind of normal, right? You go to your information sources. Everyone has an appetite for narrative bias. Very few have an appetite for challenging information that's difficult to process and that would force you to reconsider your predictions, reconsider your projections about the future. We all have that, right? So what's important is that you do recognize when it happens, right? You recognize what cognitive dissonance feels like. It's that pit of anger in your stomach when you hear something you don't like. It doesn't matter if it's right or wrong, but if it's so different to what you already think, it will cause you to have to at least consider the meaning of and the implications of that story. So we are all capable of this. Nobody wants to do the extra little bit of work to recalibrate their projections, recalibrate their future. The best among us are able to do this with less personal annoyance than other people, but it's difficult, right? It's difficult for everyone. On this show, we try our best to look at things from both sides. We try our best to have to at least face up to cognitive dissonance, to face it with head on and see how it affects us. At the same time, we are definitely pro Bitcoin and pro Bitcoin narratives, and have a tremendous bias towards Bitcoin narratives that will help bring us a better future. And I think that's at this point anyway goes back to that gut thing, right? Goes back to living healthy, not being compliant. I myself, I was mentioning on a show this week or something. I've been in Bitcoin for 10 years now. And when I first started as a professional in Bitcoin 10 years ago, of course, what we were doing here seemed a lot crazier and a lot more, let's say, marginal, right? Bitcoin was not a center stage macro asset. We were not involved in all of these political maneuverings. We were not talking literally about a Bitcoin citadel being built within the next 2 or 3 years. We were not there. But all the early Bitcoiners who were around definitely did trust their gut and definitely did go on their intuition. And many of us gave up careers that were heavily influenced by credentialism and the old world. And, I had been successful in that old world, if you will, right? I was a lawyer or trained as a lawyer. I wasn't a member of a bar association, but I had a job that treated me as a professional that dealt with the law. And it was, a good job. But of course, once you saw Bitcoin, once the ideas came into your mind, you couldn't forget them, and you couldn't even look at the world the same way anymore. And that was a gut, that was an intuition thing. And I think because of the high health factors, that a lot of people have developed over the years around Bitcoin, around the Bitcoin community, the diet, the bro science that goes into weightlifting and understanding the positive effects of just a little bit of weightlifting and a little bit of motivation to keep your testosterone levels high and the implications for that. And I think we have come to that point to understand that a lot of us, because it's still the case with Bitcoin, right? We are still running on our intuition. We're running on a massive recalibration of the entire financial system because we have a hunch that is what we need, right? Now, the hunch is not just a feeling deep down anymore, right? We've surfaced it, we've talked about it a lot, we've shared ideas, and now we've all shared this vision of the future and shared collectively what we think can happen. So it's a big difference, right? It's a big difference. And this whole lab leak story has been excellent for us because we have seen now the process of information laundering, and it's been shared widely. Like, even dealing with even when the Mueller report came out in, what was it, 2018 or 2019, and it exonerated Trump, remember that there was half the people who hated Trump and wouldn't listen to the answer anyway, right? We were disagreeing on basic facts. I had a big hope at the time that the collapse of the Mueller thing would actually lead people to offload some of their Trump baggage, some of the brainwashing that had gone around Trump. It didn't happen, right? I predicted when Trump won in 2016 that it would have a massive effect, and you would have all kinds of people who would finally wake up because he was president, and you would have sort of a let's call it a crystallization of support around him, particularly from the African American community. I predicted it didn't happen. The brainwashing, the psyops, the fake news. I couldn't have predicted exactly how nefarious the information laundering was going to be around Russiagate and all those things. I just didn't see it coming. That was something that I didn't even know was possible to lie at that industrial scale. I didn't know that. I'd never seen it done on that scale. I thought Trump could win hearts and minds, but he was never really given a chance back then. Now, he made a ton of mistakes himself, and he shouldn't be forgiven for them, right? People say, oh, even he gave a speech this weekend at CPAC about retribution and what he's going to do. Oops, I almost did something about retribution and all of these things. But remember, Trump did follow the Paul Ryan folks in the early days. He did get stuff done with those GOP folks, with those uniparty folks, right? And we can't easily just ignore that, right? He had a chance, did play ball with the wrong people, and many people called it out at the time. If you remember, Mike Cernovich was the first major Trump 2016 supporter to abandon him in 2018, I think, because he was too close to Paul Ryan and the GOP and the Uniparty, and a lot of people said he shouldn't have been doing that, but he did. So that's partly where some criticism of Trump still is valid, and some skepticism about what he can do and can't do and will do in the next election and can't do, where that comes from. So we remain skeptical, right? We remain skeptical. However, right, we understand that speech he gave the other day was Trump at his absolute best. And the speech I mean is not the CPAC one. I'm talking about the campaign speech that he made, the short video talking about future cities, talking about flying cars, talking about a renewal of the American system and beautification of American buildings. And all of this stuff was just golden, right? I mean, really, really high level persuasion that you don't see normal people do very often, right? You can't imagine Biden making such a clear vision of the future and sharing it in the way he did. Even the contest. I mean, I continue to be super excited about the idea of a contest, right? Remember, Trump is one of the great TV hosts of all time. Remember, with The Apprentice and all that stuff, he was a dominant force in television for many years because he understands the production, the drama, how you entertain people. I can imagine a contest right now for Citadel building being one of the most interesting things we could ever see. And that's what we'll talk about in a second, but I've designed here what I think is a submission to this. I think we should use some AI and get better pictures and all that stuff. But we'll talk about it in a second. This is more or less what we can do with Trump's plan, and I think there will be a Bitcoin submission. Remember, I predicted that Bitcoin would be a major story in the 2024 presidential election. It would find its way into the main debate, and this is one of the avenues that are possible. These citadels, these cities, right? So. But let's go back before we continue with the Citadel discussion about this information laundering and how easily duped by narrative bias both right-wing and left-wing people are. Scott Adams had a really interesting take on it, and this is what he said. As we recently learned, most political conspiracy theories appear to be true. But I observe a pattern in what types of untruths the left and the right believe. The right's untruths tend to organically spring from true believers in their ranks, right? So QAnon, for example, right? I had a pretty good sense that QAnon was fake from the early days, but I didn't have any proof. I just said, well, it's a little too much hallucinating and a little too much. But you never know. I mean, I still don't. We don't know, right? But I don't believe it's legitimate. He goes on, the left's untruths are more likely to be deliberate hoaxes concocted by their political operators. Only the left creates elaborate hoaxes to spring on their own members. The right is just sometimes wrong. And he does a list, right? Now look at these. He calls it the hoax quiz, right? How many of these hoaxes do you still believe are true? And he made you can click the boxes. So the Russia collusion hoax, right? Fake. Steele dossier hooker story, right? That Trump peed on the hookers, right? That was the thing that Putin had on him, right? If that's where the Russia collusion story comes from. He had these videos where apparently he did these things. The next, Russia paying bounties on U.S. soldiers in Afghanistan, fake. Trump called neo-Nazis fine people. We know the Charlottesville thing has always been an edit hoax, right? He says the exact words, I'm not talking about the white nationalists and all that stuff, right? Now, go back in time and rewatch the Charlottesville video, and you tell me if it doesn't look like that American Liberty Front or whatever it was called that would wear masks and they were all in khakis. I mean, these guys glow, right? These were paid actors. I believe to this day the Charlottesville hoax was a series of paid actors to create a deliberate hoax in order to call Trump a racist. And his reaction was just edited to fit the bill because he actually did condemn it. Now, could have condemned it quicker, blah, blah, blah. But nevertheless, that's what happened. The Trump suggested drinking and injecting bleach to fight COVID, right? Remember the drinking bleach? Well, we know what he meant, right? There's a real therapeutic product that was created that used light as a disinfectant and it indeed was injected into your lungs and was able to disinfect whatever was going on. So what he was saying there, and he made a terrible mistake, Trump, when he apologized. That's one that he apologized for. He never should have apologized for it because it was just not true. What he said was fine. There were real things. The Trump overfed the koi fish in Japan. Remember that one when he dumped the bucket of food to the koi fish? If you take the edit out and you watch the whole video, so did Abe, the prime minister of Japan. Trump cleared protesters with tear gas for a Bible photo op. Never happened. Hunter's laptop was Russian disinformation. Of course it wasn't. Elections are fair because no court found major fraud. Now, the courts are not capable of looking into fraud. No one is, right? If you can't audit the software, the hardware, the systems, no one can check the code. We understand in Bitcoin what this stuff means, right? Bitcoiners have always had a better take on election corruption. You don't need to prove that this person did it or that person did it. All you need to know is the system isn't auditable, that it's entirely centralized, that it's a black box, and because there's no auditability, there is no election. There's no election. We never had elections. People voted, but that doesn't mean you had an election at all, right? If you can't audit it, you had no election. That's that simple. We don't have elections. It could have been cleaner. I can say this. The 2020 election could have been the cleanest election we've had in America in a generation. It doesn't mean we had an election. Or the clearest vote we've had in 20 years as far as complying with the rules, but the rules are stupid, right? You can't actually audit votes. Therefore, the whole system, as we understand in system design, the reason why we are even interested in Bitcoin in the first place is because of the engineering and the calibration and the orchestration of the system, which is a fine trade-off between its ease of use and its credibility, right? We have a high credibility system. If you would make Bitcoin easier to use, for example, as we see all these consumer move fast, fail things, Silicon Valley shitcoins that constantly just say, oh, ease of use is everything, right? We're not in Bitcoin because Visa can't scale. Visa scales just fine, right? It's not about ease of use. It's about credibility of the system. We don't, the ease of use thing is already there. All these other coins that come out with different calibrations that favor ease of use have to give up. There's a trade-off on its credibility. This trade-off triangle is called Zuko's triangle. The creator of Zcash first came up with the dilemma of engineering problems. He puts human readable in there as ease of use, but that's just one part of it. So he has a three like a triangle. For the sake of elections, we can boil it down to just a simple trade-off between compliance or ease of use and credibility. And we understand those trade-offs. So Bitcoiners have a much better position and understood the election much better than other people. You don't need to have proof of someone actually cheating and what system they use to cheat. The system itself on all sides, right? That's why Republicans don't want to change it. They've been gerrymandering with their stuff. And that's why the Democrats don't want to change it. They gerrymander their own little area to help themselves win. But no one is actually interested in having auditable, credible elections. They just want to win. So it's not a left or right thing. The elections themselves are corrupted, right? So how's this one? That January 6th was an insurrection to overthrow the government. You know, where they all stayed in the velvety ropes. And of course, we all know that if Buffalo Head Guy had entered another room, he would have been bestowed powers that would have taken the largest military and nuclear power the world has ever known and just given him all the authority because he was in a magic room. And the other guy who took the magic lectern, right, Nancy Pelosi's magic lectern, he also was given these superpowers, right? It's like they get powerful. So that's the story we're being told. That's how it was an insurrection, right? Of course, if these people are in the room, it's an insurrection, right? That Trump tried to grab the steering wheel of the Beast, his car, right? That never happened. Like, what did he do? He jumped from the back and tried to jump into the wheel? Of course not, right? That Border Patrol agents whipped illegal border crossers. Never happened. That Trump stored nuclear secrets in Mar-a-Lago. Remember when they had the FBI raid Mar-a-Lago and that was a big story last year, right? Now we don't even know what was in there. Nuclear secrets, right? Governor Whitmer in Michigan, this whole story that she was kidnapped, but it turns out that everyone involved was an FBI plant and that the only people that weren't were just dumb people who didn't even know what they were doing and were caught up in this whole mess. Let me know if the audio and everything is still coming in well. I just saw a bit of a lag for a second. Let me erase some stuff here. Yeah. So, and the list goes on and on, right? That these more or less information laundering systems have been in place for a while, and all of them have this design and targeted aspect, right? Like Scott Adams says here, only the left creates elaborate hoaxes to spring on their own members. So they're actively trying to bamboozle their own users, their own support, their own backers, right? So very, very different. Now, think about that in its entire context of Fauci information laundering and what's going on with anyone who criticizes, still to this day, anyone who criticizes that. Now, go back to the Woody Harrelson talk that he gave on Saturday Night Live just a week ago, right? The week ago, he came out and did his, what they said was his anti-vax conspiracy theories, right? So that's what from his Saturday Night Live monologue. We've even talked about the turnaround time, right? He was on TV at 11:30 p.m. Eastern time on a Saturday night. How many people are working in all of these fake news outlets Sunday morning by 7:30 a.m.? Well, it was enough to repeat the talking point several times over. Anti-vax conspiracies. It appeared in Rolling Stone, several other magazines. And Mark Stein here says the following, right? Reacting to that after 1 week. And it's a great take. And he goes, Woody Harrelson's joke was that the big pharma cartels are bought and paid for by the media. And then, literally in unison, all of the media are saying he's a conspiracy theorist. It's pretty good. It's pretty good. Pretty good stuff. So all of these hoaxes, all of this information, you can even boil it down one little bit further. And Mark Andreessen commented on this. He says, and this is from a definition from the Global Disinformation Index, right? The Global Disinformation Index. And what they define, they say how we define disinformation. This is what they say. Whenever someone peddles an intentionally misleading narrative, often crafted using selected elements of fact, that is adversarial in nature against an at-risk individual group or institution that creates a risk of harm, disinformation is being spread. Adversarial narratives undermine trust. Social, political, economic, and scientific institutions are so exacerbating division within our society, right? And Mark Andreessen comments, disinformation is literally defined by these disinformation experts as an adversarial narrative. The good thing about Bitcoin is we are in an adversarial network, right? So we have no problem processing adversarial information. We have no problem with adversarial narratives, which psychologically makes us much more poised in this environment that we're in to win, right? Because we can handle adversarial narratives, because we have an adversarial way of thinking. That is the foundational to being a Bitcoiner, is to understand that you are in an adversarial network in Bitcoin itself. Bitcoin is an adversarial network. However, the adversarial incentives allow us to coordinate in ways that both acknowledge human nature, our selfishness, our predisposition to narrative bias, our predisposition to not having to recalibrate our future projections, all the things that we know are shitty about humans. It incorporates all of those and makes it work anyway. And that's always the sign of a well-built system that acknowledges human behavior and is able to modify through incentives how we actually act. And that's one of those things where, for example, I would say a lot of left-wing people, especially when it comes to diet or other things, this whole thing now, don't criticize how people look, don't criticize if they're overweight, that's a form of prejudice, and all those other arguments that you hear around. Well, one of the big problems with that is that it doesn't acknowledge human nature at all, right? We're not going to make health get better by ignoring the things that make us unhealthy. We're just not going to. We are in an adversarial relationship with the people who make food, with the people who are running our own mega cartels, which are our grocery stores. These are some of the most corrupted institutions in America. I mean, they're really, really bad. Look at the American waistline. Look at the American health index, right? America is not doing great because our grocery stores are such a cartel, and we are incapable of understanding we're in an adversarial relationship with them, right? We got Coke and Pepsi telling you that your nuts and your balls and your testosterone are going to go up if you drink their shit. It's obviously not true, right? I don't think I need to be a scientist to tell you that Coca-Cola ain't going to give you more of a boner. It's not going to work, right? It's not going to happen. So I don't mean to be too, crass and all that stuff, but it's just not going to happen. So now you also get this story. This is from CoinDesk, and put this into this narrative, information laundering and what's going on. So this has to do with the CBDC that the government is trying to implement, right? And we see all kinds of debate around that now. And you have this guy named Dalip Singh, a recent top economic advisor for U.S. President Joe Biden, told senators the administration was an active pursuit of a digital dollar as a means to crowd out private cryptocurrencies, including Bitcoin, obviously. So again, they're aware of these incentive systems. They understand that Bitcoin is creating an incentive system that allows us to ignore anyone who would feed us information that's been laundered, that allows us to turn the adversarial nature of propaganda on itself, and allows us to sift through it, because within our little adversarial network, we understand the P2P nature of information. Bitcoin meetups, Bitcoin 2023 in Miami, all of these gatherings are a big, big help to us because we can watch each other's backs, we can help each other, and that's the nature of being in a peer-to-peer network. however adversarial it is, right? People understand who's on whose side and work together in ways that we haven't really seen before, and that is conjuring all new forces which will help reshape the world, I think, simply because psychologically our views, our footing in the world today is just much stronger, much more square to the problems than anyone else, right? Anyone who is being tricked by these information laundering systems is just going to get pushed over into the new thing tomorrow anyway, right? You hear them all now. China, what are we going to do about China? We got to arm Taiwan now. Arming Ukraine wasn't enough, right? Now we got to arm Taiwan. And you hear that all the time now. Where did that come from? When were we talking about arming Taiwan? And now it's all the, oh, they created SARS, they created COVID in China. Maybe, and I think there should be punishment for anyone who's involved in creating this, but we don't know who. I mean, why are we exonerating people like Fauci, who we see clearly paid for, commissioned fake science to information launder the narrative in April 2020, was talking about it with the president? It was a scam. It was a complete scam then. So things are changing quick, and that's the good news, right? That's the good news. But with what Trump did with his speech on the Citadels, which we're going to get to in a minute, we can start to see that the narratives are going to change in ways that we can't even imagine, that are so drastically different from the quagmire and the bullshit we have today, right? So just imagine if Trump gets his, because no one covers him, right? No one covered this speech. You didn't hear it on Fox News. You didn't hear it on any of the outlets, right? Everyone's ignoring Trump. Everyone ignored his CPAC speech. Everyone ignored this thing, but the information is still percolating. And at a certain point, you're not going to be able to hide it when you actually have real proposals. And imagine there is some kind of a TV show around the 10 future cities. Bitcoin submission would look something like this. Now, tell me how great this would be for America, right? You can imagine, I'm one of the few people who's lived in a citadel. There's only one left in America. I lived in it. It's in Quebec City. The whole city is covered in ramparts, and we have a citadel which you can still go to up on the hill. It's officially the Queen's residence, or she's dead, but I guess the new guy, the king. And I've partied in there. I saw a huge fire break out in one of the buildings once where the whole thing burnt down. It was amazing. I watched it live. It was crazy. So I've partied in the buildings. I lived within the walled city of Quebec. Not that I have some amazing experience in ramparts. There's a citadel as well near my farm in Vermont, right in Lake Champlain. If you didn't know that, it's right at the mouth of Lake Champlain on the Canadian-U.S. border. It was built by Canadians. You can see it on Google Maps. It's amazing. If there is a zombie apocalypse, guys, I'll meet you all there. We're going to be so safe. It's going to be so cool, so easy, right? It's just a citadel on an island in a river, plenty of fish, plenty of stuff going on. We'll be fine. Plenty of game around, right? But it's an amazing citadel. So there's a few of these citadels in Canada still, but only one that's really vibrant and alive, and that's the Quebec City one. And so I live there. Not that I'm an expert in citadels, but I'm one of the few people who's lived in a citadel. And it was a neat feeling. The walls all around Quebec City, you can close the gates if you need to. It's totally different, right? There's a big castle in the middle. It's fun. So here's what I'm thinking, right? Here's one of the citadels. They look like these star forts, right? There's a big star fort in Quebec City, and like I said, a star fort in the islands, and that's what you get here is these moat, right? You can get water and build a moat. So in my design, we've got Bitcoin mining as an anchor tenant for small modular nuclear reactors. The small modular nuclear reactor is fueling the Bitcoin mines, but it's also fueling the pump from whatever large saltwater source is nearby. So there's one in Halifax, but it's not. There's a star fort, but it's not the full ramparts around the city. That's the difference. The only ramparts with the full walls that extend through the city is Quebec City. I was in just on one of these other French islands here in the Caribbean. They had a star fort too that I went into. I brought my daughter into one of them one day just to walk around. Really cool stuff. But Quebec has the full ramparts and star fort still in the city, and there's no other one in North America that has all of that. Check out the ramparts sometimes; they're really cool. Like you can walk on top of them. They're just neat, right? They're around the entire city, which is on top of a cliff. So you got the cliffs and then the ramparts all around it. So here's what I'm thinking: you get the nuclear reactor, small modular nuclear reactor. This can be in the Inland Empire in California where there's deserts. This can be in Nevada. This can be in Arizona. This can be in Texas. This can be anywhere where there's no people and it's inhospitable and totally desert right now. This could be Salt Lake, Utah, right? So on the other side of the mountains, I've got some desert here, right? But this can also be on the coast of Africa in the Sahara Desert. This could be in our polar deserts, right? So instead of uh, instead of sand desert, you can have snow deserts. In any event, what you do is you go near some salt water. And do you know how to desalinate water? It's couldn't be more simple. You just pump it through filters, or you pump it uphill. If you pump it uphill, the salt will actually separate if there's a few steps. It's like the opposite of gold mining, right? You know, gold mining, you wash the water through the wash plan, and the weight of the gold and it will fall below all the wash pan sheets, right? That's panning for gold. That's what you're doing. You're separating the weight and size of what's in the water and the rocks and the metals. But uphill, if you do it uphill, if you put a wash plan uphill, you pump, 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 and eventually all you're going to have is clean, fresh water by the top, and all the salt will fall behind. So if you imagine this thing going over the Rocky Mountains from the Pacific Ocean, then you can just imagine that all of the water would make it to the top of the mountain as pure, and then it can rush back down into the desert as pure water in a river or whatever. But by the end, you'll have separated the salt in just the ascent through the coast of California. That would be enough. So now you got fresh water. You can build a moat here, and you can help green the inside of the Star Fort or whatever your citadel is. But then the next part is the most important part, and this is where we get the high T, right? This is where we get the high testosterone, high T. Did you know, by the way, and this is another weird synchronistic thing that can happen. If you remember, one of the big political movements, failed political movements in the end, was prohibition in the United States, right? And the slogan for prohibition was a teetotaler, right? Teetotaler. Those were the people who were for prohibition and anti-alcohol, right? The teetotalers. Now, I didn't know. I thought it was like people who wanted to drink tea for many years. I thought that's what it meant. It was like people who like tea and not alcohol. And the teetotalers were, totaling was like, in my mind, it was, I don't know where I came up with this, but totaling to me was like something you did to keep your tea delicious or warm. I don't know, whatever. But in the end, it was not anything to do with that. It was a short slogan for capital T total abstinence. So it meant teetotal abstinence, teetotaler, right? It was just a slogan to mean you're totally abstinent, teetotal, teetotalers. And now I can see teetotaling become an issue again. What would teetotaling be this time? Well, it would be people who want to optimize for testosterone, right? We're seeing, just as we mentioned at the start of the story, what happens to you if you don't have high T, right? You can actually be compliant. You can actually be incapable of trusting your gut. Now, I think everyone in Bitcoin has to have some capacity to trust their gut. What we're doing is crazy. It is. Let's all admit it, right? We all have to admit that we are trying to fundamentally alter our entire economic system on Earth to something new because we think it will unlock incentive models and human potential and would lead to flourishing. And it's getting more and more realistic every day, but it was insane when we first started, right? It was a bunch of people who said, yeah, free weekends. Let's change the financial system. It's the only way through, right? And very successful we've been in the meantime, but we need other things to help us get over the line. And I still think diet and bro science behind diet is one of the big things we can offer the world because we can cut through the bullshit of science and information laundering and Pepsi and Coke funded studies that say you're going to get a good, you don't need Viagra if you drink their product. And of course we know it's a lie, right? We know it's so stupid. But we know that because of our network, because we have a peer-to-peer network, because we understand and share information with each other. You're going to see at Bitcoin 2023, we're going to have a bunch of, healthy bros that lift weights all the time, right? That's just a part of the industry now. And, you can imagine, right? So getting back to terraformation, getting back to these cities that Trump and the contest that he's talking about, the Bitcoin entry would look a lot like us bringing our cows. And we know what cow poo can do, right? Cow poo can turn a desert green. So if you bring the water, you give the cows the water, we bring our cows as Bitcoiners, they crap everywhere, right? We're going to be full of testosterone and trusting our gut and pioneering and carving out an entirely new way of Americans to live. And I think of the 10 cities he's planning on building, it could be us, right? I really believe we can build one of them. But it's not just Trump, right? We do have to be skeptical of Trump, and we do have to wonder about a lot of the things that people criticize him for. Again, he got shit done for Paul Ryan, for the GOP. He had Karl Rove as his campaign manager in 2020. Karl Rove was a snake in the grass against him in 2016. This is Karl Rove is like a pure GOP operator, right? He's a holdover from the George Bush time. Now, Trump says he's, going out, he's going to get retribution. He hates all these people. He's changed. Maybe, it's possible. I'm not going to say no. I still have questions about Assange. I still have questions about Ed Snowden. What the hell happened with those pardons, right? So it's not just Trump, right? Vivek Ramaswamy is another one. And here's what Vivek has been talking about. So I think he is going to leech off of Trump's competition here. He's pretty savvy about seeing Trump get attention for bold ideas, but he has his own. He talks about shutting down the FBI and replace it with something new from scratch, right? We should have done it 60 years ago, he says. We can finally do it in 2015. And, this fucking sick Bill Ackman, this motherfucker, right? Remember this Bill Ackman? You know who he is? He's like one of these VCs. If he says something, or not even, is he a VC or is he just an investor? I don't know. Oh my goodness, right? Bill Ackman spoke about something. He was so dumb. He thought there was aliens with those stupid balloons that were going around America, right? So this fucking guy, this is what he says to Vivek Ramaswamy. I don't think Vivek Ramaswamy will succeed by burning the house down. While I agree that many government agents need reform and that there is enormous waste in government, I think reform is the right answer. We have much work to do as a country to rebuild every agency from scratch. We have too much work to do as a country to rebuild every agency from scratch. Vivek says, I used to think that way, but I am now convinced that for some government agencies that have gone so far awry, the best solution is to shut them down and replace them with new ones built from scratch to carry out the actual function, a form of creative destruction. And I think that's what we're going to do across many agencies. We are going to shut down almost everything we created to win World War II. All of these agencies, all of these stupid bureaucrats that continue to just live in a time that is gone by, right? They were created to put human effort behind institutions that were supposed to give us freedoms and blah, blah, blah. And that's where the myth really became crystallized, that our freedoms came from their work. Get the fuck out of here. They don't even come close, right? Our freedoms come from the way we live. They have nothing to do with democracy. Democracy can do the last ditch effort to protect them so that no one can come physically to take them from you. But that's about it. That's about it, right? That's why in the American system, freedom of speech, the right to bear arms are fundamental. First Amendment and Second Amendment for a reason, because those are the things that give you freedom. They're nothing to do with democracy, right? Who cares? Having those rights are what can allow you to live as a free person, and that's all the difference. So we got a competition, right? Trump talking about big picture stuff. I think Bitcoiners are going to enter. If they don't, I'll start using an AI to generate some cool stuff about this and see if we can make a submission. I think it's going to work. I think we'd get a lot of attention for this. And if he doesn't do it, I think Vivek, just by talking about what he mentioned with FBI here, and I think putting a finger on their information laundering, right, and how crooked they've been in information laundering, I think he's capable of seeing the same level of change that Trump is when it comes to these cities, and I imagine he might copy the idea. So it looks like we're going to have a new city competition, and it looks like Bitcoiners are going to be able to get a whole new level of profile from that, which would be great. Which would be great. All right. What does Bud say? Thank you for validating my Bitcoin insanity. My friends just think I'm crazy, but you truly understand my insanity. I mean, I don't know if we're insane. Like, if you're reading a news outlet and it says that Coke and Pepsi will help your boners, and then you read it again the next day, I got to tell you about a plan they have in Canada, and you should think about it a bit. It's called MAID, and you can go and because I don't know if you're going to be savable at this point, right? I don't know, maybe, but you should consider if that's what you're reading, right? No, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. I don't want to go that far. We don't want anyone to harm themselves ever, and we should never make light of the quagmire people get in. It's a real thing. But if you're reading articles about Pepsi and Coke, stop. Right? If you need help, stop. You don't. Pepsi and Coke are not going to help you be happy. They're just not. Right? So, we are going to be able to talk about everything in the next US presidential election because things are in flux and changing so much. And Bitcoin remains a great delivery system to talk about diet, nuclear energy, re incentivization of networks, and protection from all of these crazy ideas. So there you go. There you go. Be Bitcoiner, yeah. Get a second opinion from Dr. Pepper. Get a second opinion from Dr. Pepper. That's really good, man. You gotta tweet that. You gotta tweet that. You gotta go find that story about Coke and Pepsi and get a second opinion from Dr. Pepper. Trust the science. We love the science. Trust the science. They're all just going to watch where they believe the largest amounts of success come from, attempt to extrapolate what brought this success, and copy it. Yeah. Ultimately, they will get it wrong because they will fail, scrap together projects they had, and tell you they were the ones that built the solutions. Yeah, yeah, could be. While in the same breath, tell you about how these solutions are bad for you because they have no tether to reality. Yeah, guys. I mean, I'm not going to say we're not up against professional weapons grade persuaders. We are. But Bitcoin has a way of unlocking this stuff and making things easy and making it easy to understand, I think, that you've been lied to. And that's what we can handle. All right, team. Peace. See you tomorrow, everyone. Let me know how all the audio went in the comments later. I think it went well. I'm going to listen, but I don't always have time to listen to the whole show again after. So if you see anything, let me know. Peace.